how do you create the good life? How do you live a life that you feel good living in? I think a lot of us run on autopilot. I know that I feel like I've done that for almost 10 years, where I'll show up at a job or I will punch in and do work, and all of the pressures and all of the things of life are happening, and I'm just simply trying to respond to them. I am just simply trying to adapt to them. And then there come certain moments where you burn out, right? Which is the moment where you realize the amount of input that you're putting into things is you're not getting the output that you want. You put high input into something, you get low output, low response that you want. And so that creates burnout. But if you put high input into something and you get equal or more amount of like positive response, what you want out of something, well, then you don't burn out. You just get juiced, you get energized, and you're happy to keep doing it. And so I've been looking at the kind of life that I've been living over the last 10 years, since getting into this whole adventure of learning how to start a business, level up, earn a high paying job, develop skills, and so on. And realizing, I think I want something different in my future. I need to level myself up to be able to meet the kind of future that I want to live. And so creating a side project or creating this brand called Saga Brand, and all the side projects that I run on the side, they're skill set, proving grounds to try to help me level up and test. But if I don't stop and ask myself, what is the ideal kind of life that I want to live, I'm going to end up flailing in all directions. So I need to find a way to laser in on what I want out of life. And maybe this conversation will help you too. Otherwise, this is just for me chronicling for myself. But what do I want out of life? I think that for me, a good life is a life that I get to live on purpose. Not that I get to live. It's a life where I choose to live on purpose. There can be options where I may not have control over things, but I can choose to control my response to them. I can choose to control who I am in those situations, and I'm not butt dialing my way through life. I think that is what I want to avoid most of all. I don't want to have, I don't want to get to the end of my life and look back and go, I wasn't really here for much of it. I was just trying to survive and like respond in the moment to everything. I don't want to live that kind of life, but I do want the kind of life where not just I swung for the fences and I did cool stuff because I could. I want to know that I was here for it, for this adventure. I think that a lot of the way that our lives are put together now doesn't actually help you do that. You're mindlessly, like I am, mindlessly on social media, mindlessly watching reruns and shows. Not that those things are necessarily bad. The problem is the mindless part of it. You're just punching in at work. You're burning yourself out, or you're getting the work done, or you hate it and you're burning yourself out. And then you go home and you're giving your family what's left, or you're giving yourself just kind of the residue of what's left. And then you spend 30, 40 years doing that, and you come out the other end wondering, well, I don't know, what was the point, right? That to me that's not a good life. So I think I want to live on purpose. And so I'm 37 now. I'm kind of maybe hitting that midpoint if things go well. So taking a little more control. And if I can't take control of everything, I can certainly take control of myself and my responses and what I choose to engage in. And so that's more about living on purpose. It's like eating on purpose. It's going to sleep on purpose, not just because I have to or because I crash onto the bed. Working, because it's on purpose, because I want to help. I want to do good. I don't just want to show up because somebody's waving money at me. So that's sort of point number one. Point number two is doing things and doing good because you can. I do think that is a definition, maybe a very valid definition of freedom. So this is why maybe America, I'm so grateful to live here, to be a part of this, the country, this community, and so on. It's because we have this culture where if you want to do good, and if you're able to hold the line while you're doing it, go ahead and do as much good as you can. That is the founding myth. That is the story of this country, that you are free to choose what you want to do that brings the maximal good to yourself and to your community and the people around you. There are plenty of other countries in the world where this is not true, and you don't have the freedom to make your own decisions and do some of the things that you want to do that can be good just because you can. Now, just because you want to is very different to just because you can. You may want to do all sorts of things, but you haven't either leveled up in the skills for it, or you literally don't have the freedom of time or of resources to help you do the good. And so I think a lot of us end up getting very depressed. that the gap between what we want and what we can do is so massive. So being aware of what you are able to do. If you remember the movie Zorro, I have this picture in my mind of the two circles that Antonio Banderas has put in, and there's the inner circle where he's told, this is your sphere of influence. And then outside of that is the next, this is what comes later. But first you have to focus on what is in the immediate thing that you can immediately affect. So third part of the thing is this, like being free. I want to be personally free. Now that's a whole big question. There's a lot of philosophy into that. If I were to, I've written down here 3 sort of thoughts here. I don't want to be addicted to things. I want this sense of self-mastery, because addiction means I am hijacked by either something else or by my own subroutines, my own protocols, or I've got programs running inside me that I'm not paying attention to anymore, and they are driving my life, and then they come and they run in the moments when I don't want them to, such as an argument with someone I love, or a situation where I'm supposed to actually show up and really pay attention and be present to that situation, and I butt dial through that situation. That's not being free, and I think it's true. It can be exhausting to be like awake and on, like personally online all the time. Part of that question actually comes back to what it means to me to live a good life, to not be always putting out dumpster fires. So when you're always on, because everything is always coming at you, it's like, honestly, it's like driving a 6-hour drive, right? There's a point at which your mind, you have to switch off your 100% attention to the road, and so that your mind can drift, and then you just automate the process of driving. You filter it out, and you can then spend 2 hours and suddenly wake up and realize, wait a second, how did I get here? How did I end up, navigating 2 hours worth of highways at 70 miles an hour? It's pretty incredible that we can actually offload that much processing down into our, I don't know, it's not our subconscious, but like non-attentive habit formation thing, right? So it can be insanely valuable, so that you can free up processing power, you can free up your attention to think about other things. The problem is when that becomes the norm, that becomes the default, and you end up with, well, like these sitcoms and TV shows and stories, or people we know in real life who are now 50, 60, 70 years old, and they've just phoned it in their whole lives, and then they can't see anymore how that's a problem. And then at that point, you begin to wonder, are we actually dealing with a real human being, a real person here? Or am I kind of dealing with a program? And at this point, they're not going to change. They certainly don't act like they're going to change. They're very difficult to deal with. Well, I don't want to be that kind of person. That is not the kind of future that I want. So I don't want to be addicted. And so some things that we do, it's like, hooray, well, people go, well, you got to eat food 3 times a day. Doesn't that count as addiction? It's like, oh, come on. It's like, this is partly why I don't think that. You can become addicted to coffee, for example, but a lot of what we do is a matter of flirting with or knowing how to handle risk, how to handle things. Like driving could be, very dangerous, risky behavior. Doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad just because it's risky. Drinking coffee, lots and lots of it obviously can be very risky. Well, if you master that, if you're doing it on purpose, if you can sort of take away the compulsion to be doing something without thinking, then you can actually be able to enjoy the thing without it becoming an addiction. There's a little bit of a side quest there, but that's the second sort of thought here, is to control my compulsions. And I'm not doing as good as I want to, let's put it that way, because I've got big ideas for myself and I'm very hard on myself. I'm sure a lot of us might be when we start this whole inner self-work journey. You're trying to pay a lot more attention to yourself more seriously. A compulsion is a thing you just default into. It's a very strong subroutine. It's a very powerful way of responding to a situation or a stimulus. And if you're not careful, it can end up driving like everything. And so that's probably what's going to be coming out of your shadow if you're not paying attention, not trying to catch yourself out of the corner of your eye. So, and that's sort of the third thing, is watching for impulses. When I'm in an argument, especially with someone I love, how am I reacting? Like I'm immediately, usually, very defensive, instantly very analytical, way more logical, in the sense of like paying attention to exactly the words that they're using so that I can respond exactly accurately. And then I completely miss the fact that the person who's having this argument is actually trying to communicate something else. But because I get so defensive and I focus on me and I instantly lock into the words being said in the moment because I want to be true and I want to be accurate, and I completely miss the fact that we're having an argument because this person wants a relationship with me. And so I miss that whole point, and that's why they get even madder, and then I get even more defensive, right? So it's being able to pay attention to that, and maybe in that moment, it's a matter of like, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to listen very hard, and I'm very carefully going to think through maybe a response later, or just do my best to say the truth as best I can in the moment. Be better aware of the person, right? But that's the whole thing about being free. I want to be freer within myself so that when situations happen in real life or start happening in life, or job offers or work offers or creativity or novels and stuff, I am more attentive to them because I'm not on autopilot. I think that's pretty vital. I also want to cultivate boldness, leadership, and serving. So I've got a list here of stuff that I'm thinking, like for me, for a good life, I want to cultivate a sense of boldness and leadership and serving. I love a definition of Robin Hood. He's one of my he was a spirit animal, one of my favorite mythical characters growing up, where he and his team and the merry men, they were brave and they were merry. And I love those two definitions because you can be brave and you can be dour or depressed. We have plenty of gritty characters who are like that. And they have plenty of merry characters who are not brave at all. And that's what sitcoms end up being full of. But to be brave and then to be merry, to be filled with the joy of life and still a bold risk taker who does good for others and for themselves. I love that combination. There's also the benefit of like the whole Robin Hood thing as a servant leader kind of concept. He was not in one of the old stories. No, not one of them, all of them. Across the old stories, Robin's method of leadership was not to be the top dog, but to actually pull together a team of people, each of whom excelled better than him at a specific skill set. And so he would routinely battle with people, and they weren't allowed to join his merry men unless they could defeat him or beat him in one-to-one combat. And I always thought that was so cool because that's so completely different to something like, for example, the Assyrian kings, where a king, I think, had to go out and kill a lion every year alone to keep proving their top dog status, because that is the ethos of that military warrior mindset. Well, then you fast forward 4,000 years, 3,000 years, and then you get a character like Robin Hood where he's like, you can't join my team unless you can beat me. What I love about that mindset is you're creating out the gate, you're creating a relationship where it's not based on purely physical ability to dominate, but on trust, on the fact that everybody knows they are in this team because they want to, not because they have to, because they love the leader, they believe in him, not because they fear him. And Robin is demonstrating skills that they don't have, these intangible skills that are sometimes, and maybe more often, more valuable when you want to operate in a high trust environment. I am not sure, it's not clear to me that a lot of ancient, like the Assyrian kings or, in the ancient world, that it was not a high trust environment. You would have a couple of close friendships, and then I don't know that people were that they loved their leaders. When they did, it was a very unique thing, such as Leonidas and his 300. Right, that's held up as a very interesting and unique situation because it was not normal. But when you have someone like Robin, for example, or someone like King Arthur, maybe, these literary figures, these mythical figures who demonstrate specific skills that most others do not have, things like foresight, magnanimity, a spirit of leadership that aims to bring out the best in the people around them. I love that. I think that is a fantastic form of leadership, but it also requires a difficult state of boldness to see outside the immediate situation. This sort of goes back to being able to live on purpose and being internally free, because if I'm always worried if somebody else is going to be better than me, then I am always going to be focusing on everybody else. It's like that line, what is it? Winners focus on winning, losers focus on winners. And so if I'm always paying attention to how somebody else is better than me, I'm a loser. And there will be a cap, a glass ceiling, a limit to how much I'm able to level up. because I'm actually not in competition with anybody else. I was ever only in competition with myself yesterday. So last two one here is creating safety for others to be themselves. The older I get, the more I realize this really matters to me. And so I've used this phrase for myself now, find your freedom. I want to find my freedom, and I want to help others to find their freedom. And it can be personally, it can be in business. I think this is an incredibly valuable thing to help others, to embolden others, to strengthen, mentor, counsel, coach. And sometimes it's not even to give advice to others. It's just they come to you and ask you for a question. I had somebody come and ask me a question yesterday. My immediate thought was to sit down and just info dump, boom, all of my answers to their question about how to build a career and stuff like that. And I got to the end and realized it is likely in giving all of this, I'm going to turn that person away from, I mean, it may not be right for them anyway, but it doesn't matter. They have to figure this out for themselves. Otherwise, it will not be a free decision on their part. They will not have had the chance to reach a decision on their own from somebody who's sort of helped them to see what they're already thinking and help them match themselves up against the magnitude of the task that they want, as opposed to just overwhelming them. So this is a skill I'm now trying to pay more attention to. Ask more questions. Maybe stop correcting people as much. It's an interesting journey for sure. But creating safety for others to be themselves. I have a small family. Being able to offer this to them as well. So I have to keep asking myself, like, am I big enough to, like, as much as I might disagree with the situation, am I big enough to let them be wrong and let them get mad at me? If I'm not, I don't think I like that vision of myself. I do like the vision where I can be big enough to let other people get mad at me and big enough to know when I'm wrong and let them get mad because I deserve it. I don't like that one very much, but I need to get better at it. So being free of the pressures of others to live as I choose. That sort of goes back to the idea of just being free. So I've got my own addictions and my own compulsions that I need to pay attention to. But then there's the compulsions that come from everybody else because they're on autopilot and they project and they're expecting me to function and operate the way that they think is best and how they want to get out of life. So I don't want to necessarily live a life that somebody else has decided is best for them, and they want me to live according to that pattern. That does not seem like a good life, and I'm sure you can look at all the people in your life who are giving you advice and telling you, here's how you can be like me, just do this, and then maybe you try it and you spend 10 years doing it and realize this sucks. I don't want this at all. So finding a boundary, creating a boundary within myself, within yourself, where I don't want anybody, I'm not giving anybody the permission to be able to come in and tell me how to live my life. I will choose to listen to who I choose to listen to. Now, technically, we have this freedom anyway. It's called your conscience. We have this autonomy anyway. We just don't live it. We just don't flex it or exercise it. We have a door, in the garden of ourselves, we have a door, and we are free to actually shut that thing and keep it shut for as long as we want. Now, there are some people who keep it shut and they never learn at all. They never come out, right? They never talk to anybody. They never learn from anybody. They never come out and engage with other people because you on your own don't know enough at all to be able to deal with life. This great example, we're not just a closed garden. You're supposed to nourish yourself inside your closed garden, and then you go out and you forage and you hunt and you forage the fields and you pick things and you learn to eat everything. We're omnivores, right? On a more meta level, one of the ways that we survive as humans is we take information from everywhere and we field test it in our imaginations so that we don't die the moment we step outside the little garden of who we are. But there are some people whose doors are open all day long, and anybody can just walk right in and tell them, oh, your garden needs to be structured this way. You need to take down your walls, especially if you're dealing with narcissists in your life. They have no respect for your boundaries. They have no desire for you to become your own autonomous self. And that is a very real problem. Finding a way to be able to close your door, to keep your boundaries up, and even on the inside, to be able to say no. And to start finding ways to make decisions for yourself, to get out of situations where people no longer respect your boundaries. That is not always easy. And I absolutely understand it can be insanely difficult for some people. If you've never heard of Viktor Frankl, but he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, and the whole thing was, I think he was, I don't remember. Anyhow, he was captured, put in a concentration camp during the Second World War. I think he was a psychologist. It's been 10 years since I read this book. Anyhow, his whole thing was he noticed that it wasn't always the biggest and strongest and most jacked people who survived. In fact, a lot of those people died early on, if I remember right. He noticed that sometimes it was these reedy, skinny people who would survive, and he would wonder why, and he realized it would come down to their attitude, their relationship to the suffering and the sacrifice that they were going through. If they lived in a state of constant resistance to it all the time, it wore them down because the reality of the situation is so much bigger than them. But if they learn to like detach from it, observe from it, label it, convert it in their experience into something different, turn water into wine, then things changed. And they were able to actually see purpose and create a sense of meaning to be able to survive. The moment that you decide life is meaningless and everything awful that happens to you is meaningless. I'm not saying that everything, how do you say this? I'm not saying that everything must happen to you the way it's happened. Sometimes stuff happens. I get it. But how you choose to respond to that and how to handle that, how you sometimes discover meaning in things and sometimes create meaning for things so that you can get through them. And so what Viktor Frankl did was he sort of abstracted and he looked at his situation and decided, what if I study myself? What if I watch my responses to this whole thing? This will be the most fascinating psychological experiment, that he'd ever done in his life, something like this. And I may be getting it wrong. But so he was able to create meaning for himself and to observe as harsh as things were. And he survived. And then he ended up writing a book about the fact that we don't just have a will to power, which is not just objectionable, questionable. We definitely have a will to meaning, where things have to make sense. There's got to be a purpose. That's what it means to be a human person. So, but that means he found a state of freedom inside himself. Part of my story is breaking away from, getting away from a family situation, a life situation that did not allow me to create that sense of autonomy. So getting away from narcissism, literally getting in a car, driving 8 hours, getting away from everything. Not easy to do, insanely hard to do. But for me, it became very clear, I'm going to maintain a bully-free zone for myself. I've got to figure this out for myself, for my family. I'm not letting anybody in if I can help it, if I can swing it, and I've made mistakes and people have felt they can kick down the door and just walk right in. And that's okay. Try again, close that door, learn to keep it closed, learn not to let somebody else just walk in and walk all over. So no one orders me unless I permit them because I want to be free on the inside. So I think being able to live like that, you can take those things and you can put them, no matter your life situation. If you're like a fisherman in Sardinia, if you're a marketer in America, like I am, a sheep farmer in New Zealand, doesn't matter. All of these things I think these are things that are going to matter to almost anybody. Okay, maybe some of them won't. So for me, to be able to live on purpose, to do things that are good because you can, to be free. I want to be free of the things that are in me that I did not choose to or agree with. These are things that I inherited or just cards I was born with that I have to learn to master. I'm not born, and I didn't come into this world perfect, came in flawed, and I have to learn to figure out and master the parts of me that don't align with reality. To be able to create safety for others. That's where I'm beginning to sort of dispense that or share the freedom that I have, to be able to share that with others, so help them find their freedom. And then to be free of the pressures that then come from other people. I want to be free of that too, so that in myself, I'm able to be and do the kind of good that I want to do, because this then leads to the ideal future, right? If I can live the good life, well, why does that even matter? What is a good life? Well, for an ideal future. For me, my ideal future is to be able to do the work that I believe in. Instead of, again, butt dialing my way through life and through work, what if I get to choose how I want to work and how much I want and how well I can do it because I believe in what I'm doing? And I recognize that a lot of us are stuck in life situations, job situations where that's not possible and that's not true. Maybe yet. I'm very interested in the kind of future that we now have that allows us to actually create more of our own freedom, because tools are different and expectations are beginning to change. It's kind of why I'm starting this channel, why I want to start a new show and a new podcast on this channel, and kind of why I want to start this whole brand is to discover and create freedom in our work life, because work needs to matter as well. So I want to be able to control who I work with and how I serve them and how I can help them. Ideally, this is what everybody wants, good people and great people. And I recognize, after having messed around in this for like 10 years, they're not always going to be easy people. But I am going to believe that we're all trying to accomplish the same valuable, good thing. And so we're going to, grind the edges off each other, because it's in working and it's in engaging with the world and it's in doing things with people that you learn to see where you're weak, see where you're strong, use your strengths to help your weaknesses get better, right? But if you don't have anybody helping you see these things, if you're constantly closed off and you're not actually listening and you're not actually trying to move towards the kind of future and the kind of ideal future and the good life that you want, you're not going to change. You're going to stay stuck, and you're going to optimize yourself to live for the moment right now, as opposed to where you're trying to go and what you're trying to get out of life. I think it was Alex Hormozi actually shared this example, which I think it's funny, because I remember thinking the same thing 15 years ago, where he's like, when you ask 70-year-old people, well, what do you think about this and this? And they go, none of that matters. None of that is important. And so he ended up asking himself, well, what if I pulled that future forward? What if I lived as if I was 70? And then what if I decided not to care about all the things that a 70-year-old says is not important, and I care only about the things that a 70-year-old says is important, because they've field-tested life over the long term. So what if I learned to live like them? And then do that now, and kind of hack the learning circuit, right? And so I thought, and then he's gone on to try to do it, and he's gone on to be successful. And so you can argue maybe it's very good advice. Well, I remember being in my mid to late teens and just thinking, as I'm, looking at the culture, looking at what's popular and stuff, and realizing everybody's optimizing for right now, you've got a specific kind of health and a specific kind of look that you only get, between late teens to early 30s. And to optimize your life just for that, let's say, highly fertile period, highly procreative period. And that's not what it means to be a human. And then to just dismiss everybody who doesn't fit that. First of all, that's just awful. And second of all, who made those decisions and who put them in charge? Because everybody up until you're 90 years old, that's the totality of a human experience. So we need to build a life that honors the totality of that experience, and especially the lessons that you end up learning later on, because you get diluted early on. So if you can learn from the wisdom of later on and apply it earlier on, well, you'll level up faster. You'll be more effective faster. You will feel happier faster. You will be freer sooner. Okay, these are things that I want. Because I don't want to be dead inside. How many of us feel like that? I don't want a future where I'm still exactly in the same place, grinding away, making, for example, exactly the same amount of income, and still feeling so unfree that I can never stop until the day I drop. That is not a future I want. I think that there are a lot of people who want to keep us in that mindset. And there's a whole discussion about why. I don't. I would think that there is a massive chance to create a healthy and a good freedom. And I'm not saying that kind of future, the kind of future I want, is one where I'm rolling in a ton of money and, jet planes and massive bank accounts. I don't actually think that would make me happier. I don't actually think that might be even good. Being able to be free to choose to do the amount of good that I want to do. Okay, that's a future that I can believe in. So, and that's kind of where we're going to go with this channel. I don't want to be afraid of the future. There are a lot of us, and especially if you follow the legacy news cycle, heck, if you follow influencers and a lot of other, YouTube channels as well, we're all terrified of the future. It is not always clear to me that that's the case. We've been terrified of the future for the last 10,000 years. We're still here. We've still made it. Humanity has 100% survival rate, success rate. I think that if I can bet on anything, I can bet on as bad as things will get, there will be some people who have found the inner freedom and the creativity to create something good and something needed, and they will pull the future forward and they will change situations. So some of that requires that we are able to change, that we are able to adapt, and we are the kind of thriving organism that is able to adapt and able to change, because we can recognize I can optimize for right now, or I can optimize for right now plus the future that I want to get to. And that's going to mean learning new things that I didn't think I needed to learn as fast as possible, practicing and testing them and iterating on them as much as I can, as fast as possible, so that I can level up or level out of the situation that I'm in. That requires change, that requires adaptability. That is a specific genius of the human organism, of the human person, being able to do that sort of thing. So there we go. Lastly, to be able to control my time to do creative things, because I don't feel like I have enough time to do the kind of creative things that I want, such as writing novels or, I don't know, working on, I'd love to start a game studio. Hooray, we can have all kinds of fun ideas. Loads of fun and creative and interesting things that also express other parts of who I am, right? Right now, I don't have a lot of time to do that sort of thing. I want to create a future where if I'm not able or I'm not doing the things that I want to do, then that either means the situation is untenable or impossible, or I am not yet leveled up, or I have not found or developed the skills or the freedom or created the freedom to be able to do the kind of things that I want to do. So as we closing out, I don't necessarily want to say this idea of radical ownership of your life, because I don't think that that is absolutely true. I think that there is a point, there's a level of ownership that you have to take, of personal control that you have to take of your life. But then there's also a point which is the cards that you're dealt, that you can't change, or that the world throws at you, or that just where you are. And there's what you can control, there's what you can't control, and then there's the wisdom to know the difference. Maybe that just comes with time, that comes with asking, that comes with patience, experience. If you can figure out those three things, what can I change? What can I do well in? What am I unable to affect? And then how do I tell the difference? Otherwise, I'm going to be beating my head against a brick wall, trying to make a hole through it, as opposed to finding the open door. Go ahead and give a like if this was helpful. I'd love to know what you think. More of a little personal thing. I'm actually taking up Dan Coe. I'm going to link to his video in the description, but he's challenged people to sit down and think through, what does it mean to create a good life? What does it mean to create an ideal future? And so I thought I'm just going to share that with you, and maybe it's helpful. And if it is, I would love to know what goes through your mind. What are you thinking? Say hi in the comments, and I'll see you soon.